Oh yeah, this video is about the Henry Milnes hand planer. Built around the area of about the Henry Milnes planers were around the area of about 1880 to 1900. And they concentrated more on lathes before and after that, and machine tools. It's got a 15-inch stroke. Didn't remember to measure the width. The width of the bed is 7 inch, but the actual travel is about 13 inch, probably about 10 inch, something like that. Because obviously the tool bit is a lot thinner than that. So it's got a lot of capacity for a machine that size. The great thing is with planers, as opposed to shapers, is that you don't need a specific type of ice. You don't need a shape of ice or a plane, a shape of ice. The whole reason why is it's all open at the back here, so you can stick a vice on reverse, so you tighten it up from the back. Because when you're planing, the force goes towards the handles at the back, the force goes towards the fixed jaw. Whereas with a shaper, you've got a body there, so you can't do that. You've got to get the vice the other way around to have the handle on this side, in which case the force goes towards the movable jaw. There's something to do with compression and expansion in the screws as well, the different types. Shape of ice apparently has got, when it's tightened, the screw is in, screw is being stretched as opposed to compressed. What difference that makes, I'm not sure. But I'll bring you in a little bit closer. I've made a few things up for it already to negate an issue that's in my head with the height adjustment. Right, the height adjustment, it's got an inherent problem with it that can be combated. If you turn that wheel, the screws are driven by these bevel gears. There's another bevel gear on the other side, and obviously because the bevel gears are opposing, one of these screws is a right hand thread and the other screw is a left hand thread. Now when you raise it, it's not an issue, but when you drop it, if these blocks at the back are tight, I've got a little bit of drag, which you'd assume you need. There's nothing to lock these screws in place, so these actually undo themselves and raise up. There's nothing holding the screws in apart from gravity. So if that's tight, like I say, if you turn it the other way around, these actually unscrew themselves. Now I was going to modify that, but I thought to myself, there's no real need. The reason why is when you tighten these bolts, there's two blocks. There's a block on this side, there's a block on that side, on the other end. The machined in a way that when you tighten these bolts down, it grips the slide. So there's so once you make the course adjustment, obviously for the work, you'll have vice in there and a work, you'll need to raise this up. When you've got the height how you want it and you've trimmed it, you lock these bolts off and there's no movement of that at all. It's incredibly tight. The tram, obviously you've got bevel gear here, bevel gear there. You've got the screws and the nuts which are also going to have backlash. Then you've got backlash in these. So the chances of dropping that or raising that, and for this horizontal bar to move perfectly horizontal and still stay trammed to the bed or the vice, is pretty slim. So the way I'm going to do it, this one here, this bevel gear has got a square head bolt. Course adjust it, get the height to where you want it to be. You slacken that nut off, then drag the, and find a wrench. I don't know where the right size spanner is. this shed's a mess, so use an adjustable. Loosen that off, move that out of the way, then you can rotate one manually. Hopefully that's in shot. Yeah, you can move it manually. Now the way I'm planning on setting it, I haven't got any gauge blocks. I made this up, this part up. It's just a piece of flat bar, flat bar with a round bar bolted to it, a flat milled on that round bar, screwed on, and then I milled the sides flush. That just drops on the dovetail. I'll get gauge blocks. Just take that V block as a gauge block. You can't clean you, what a dumbass, because I've loosened that off. There. That's magnetic. Just a 3D printed magnetic clock base that I made. That'll go on there. You'll find your height on that side in relation to the bed or the vice rails. You move this over to this side. Use the same gauge block, obviously, and just turn that by hand to get the measurement. And once you get exactly the same measurement to 1/1000 of a millimetre, you lock the bolts off, and that's that height set. And then you forget about this one, and you just move that one up and down for the fine adjustment. The mechanism, right, the feed mechanism, it's not like a shaper where the gear and the pawl is moving at all times. It only moves when it needs to. So this bed is a little bit stiff at the moment. I still need to work on this, so I'll just trigger it like these blocks would do. So you're doing your cut that way, the bed's moving that way, and when that block engages this lever, it pushes the pawl round to feed it. So it gets to the end of the cut, the block triggers the lever and it moves across. You'll then move it back. You then move the bed back, that'll raise slightly, drop, and then you'll feed again. To do a cut, that'll trip, drag it, drag the gear, and that's how the mechanism works. That block there is supposed to trip this, but there's not much weight. Weight in this, that it just automatically drags it, moves it, which is not detrimental. It just resets itself for the next drive. Then you can just flick that pawl out of the way, or readjust this. You can readjust this so basically it drives the other way round. So it feeds. So instead of feeding that way, it feeds this way. I'll now do this by hand. It's a little bit too close for the tripod. Right, this is the pawl. That just clips it in place. You can adjust the tension because the bracket itself is threaded. So you'll tighten this into the thread to get the tension that you want, and you just lock it off with a nut. To be honest, I just leave it loose, so it just does it so there's no binding. That's how this lever works. It just pushes that. There's a few refinements that I need to make. I need to get a pin for this, obviously, because that's tight. It's very tight, but you put a little bit too much tightness on the gibs, and that spins. And that ugly ass set screw, whether that's gone, there. That cap screw needs changing to a set screw. I've got those on order, but Royal Mail are on strike. It's around Christmas. It's probably going to be about a month before those set screws turn up. Whitworth set screws. The bottom bracket, that's the feed adjustment. So depending on how far you want the feed, depending on what if you want coarse feed or fine feed, you adjust that by moving that up or down. Because obviously the further it's closer to the pivot, the less it moves, the less this bar is going to raise, and vice versa. And this one, oddly enough, it's got an adjustment as well. Well, that's the movement there. Now this bar is one solid bar that goes all the way through. It's locked off there. It's got a big gear on it. I think it's about 8 dp, something like that. This bar's shouldered, and where it goes through the casting, it's slightly thinner than this. This bracket here, this arm, slides onto the bar first, and then you slide the bar in, put the gear on, and then slide it the rest of the way, and that just continues to go in until the shoulder meets up with this. There was a lot of snapped heads, a lot of square head bolts, like this one, where the heads were snapped. So I've had to drill a lot of these out. I went on a bit awry with that, too much damage, so I drilled it out and tapped it M10. That's the only one that I've changed. All the rest of them, thankfully, Whitworth, and that one as well was Whitworth. What else is there on this? You've got a nice scale, so if we can focus. Got a nice angle scale there. And there's an inscribed line on here, so when you rotate that you can see what angle you're setting it at. That's the clapper box. I'm not sure, if someone can put in the comments, I'm not sure why, there's a tapped hole there. It's not an oiler hole, there's a tapped hole there. There's a tapped hole level look in the clapper box on that side, not on that side. I was assuming there's some kind of lock, some kind of block there to lock that in position, but I can't see the advantage because you need that clapper box to move. That's the angle setter for the main slide. You've got an angle setter there as well, so you can set that instead of grinding an angle. So you want to go down the side of something, instead of grinding an angle, a long angle, so you don't get rubbing, you just set that over slightly and you'll still feed down with that handle. So imagine that block's gone on the floor. A very professional video. Now if you imagine you're doing that, you want that tool bit, get a bit, oh my god. You want the tool, instead of the tool coming down sideways like that, you'd want it offset slightly, but still to come down vertical. That's the whole idea of that. Nice big thick T-slots. There's a big set gib strip that I made there. I've still got to cut these. I need to get hold of this old Tony. There's a channel, this old Tony. He's brilliant at this. He'd be able to do that with his finger, just snap them off. I need to get the force, TOT force, just to go snap, snap, snap. I haven't quite got it yet, my hands are too cold. But yeah, that's about it. I'm thinking, because once I get all this lot done, oh, there's a couple of things. Once I get all this lot done, I doubt very much that I'll use it as a hand planer. Too much work. There's a nice big gap at the back there. The rack is about 1 inch thick and about 1.5 inches deep, and it sticks out. Say the gibs, so the gib ends there, gib strips, gib blocks both sides the rack still carries on to about there, midway. I don't know if that's too dark, maybe a little bit too dark. So that's plenty space to drill a hole through the actual rack itself and get a linkage bar similar to a shaper. Have a vertical, get this on a stand of its own, make up a stand, and do like a shaper mechanism underneath. But instead of the shaper mechanism, move the bar like that from underneath. I'd expect a shaper to be. You can't do that because there's webbing between each side. There's webbing, cross webbing, so you can't do that. So you'd have the wheel either offset to the back, or still in the centre, and have like a piston rod, and that bar will be vertical, pivoted at the bottom, and the bar at the back could move like that, and drag to cut, so to be dragging it out. The bed will move that way, obviously, to do its cut, and the return stroke will not be as much force to push it, so it's not too bad to push the link when there's no strain, and then pull it when there is strain. But I've still got to design that, and with a 15-inch stroke, that's going to be a massive wheel. Have to be at least 16-inch if I want the pivot bar, if I want that piston bar to be near the top for the most pressure, for the most leverage. And obviously the lower I get that mechanism, the smaller that wheel can be, but I don't really want it. I want it as strong as it can be. But that's the Henry Milnes. When I get it all fully up and running and on the stand and everything, I'll do another video at that point. Oh, another point that I forgot to mention, just dead quick. I'm getting sick and tired of paint. Every time I do a machine, I've got to strip the paint, repaint, and it's just a nightmare. I can't stand putting paint on old machines. So I found out about this stuff called rust converter. Now I'm not going to trial it out on this machine. I'm going to trial it out on some other cast iron first, just to see what the effects are. Because there's lots of videos on YouTube where they get a rusty wheel or something heavily crusted up in rust. They just paint the stuff over the rust. What's the point? Might as well clean the rust off first, get a wire wheel, do anything. You know what I mean? Get rid of the majority of it first and then put it on. This hasn't got a spot of rust on it. So what I want to try is darken this and protect it against corrosion. Now it's old cast iron, for one thing. So it's been properly seasoned, so I doubt it will rust. But you never know. So once I get all this lot up and running, and I've used it, and I've figured out all the flaws, fixed a few things or modified a few things, I've got it running, I'm going to take it apart again and use the rust converter, but not on this machine to start off with. I want to see what it looks like on a piece of cast iron first, see what the effects are, and if it's all good, put rust converter on this so it blackens, so it's like an old light, blackens and protects the cast iron without having to put paint on it. Because you put paint on it, it chips. And then you've got to then repaint it or repair the chips, which is a nightmare, to be honest. Whereas that rust converter, it looks anyway to be the case that you just paint it on. It's water based, you can touch it, you just paint it on with a paintbrush. It's quick drying, about 10 minutes you put another coat on, 10 minutes put another coat on, and then you just leave it. And that to me sounds like a lot easier to repair if you get a little nick out of it. Say you get a chip off the cast iron, you won't get a chip off that off the finish because there is no finish. It just darkens the material. If you get, like say, a chip out of it or something like that, you can just paint it and then just blend it in. So that was supposed to be dead quick, weren't it? But it's me.